Carlos.
Hello, KEO, and welcome to the Museum of Graffiti Artist Talk program. It's good to see you, and again, as always, always good to share stories with you. You're always been a wonderful storyteller, especially about New York City.
Thank you, man. Can you guys hear me all right? My sound is good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, let's tell some stories then.
All right.
Tall tales of daring do.
Well, for those that I think generally I asked you if you had a bio. Your story's so big, but I just think we'll just skip the bio and just flow through some of your work, which will outline your story. But I will preface all of this by saying that you are a true New Yorker and a true Brooklynite and a true hip hop head who has kind of just been able to kind of live in that world, both as a graffiti writer, also an MC, and also a writer, so to speak, on the subject, and a designer. So what I want to do is jump right into the work, and let me just adjust myself over here and turn off this light so we don't have any glare. And I want to jump into the early days with you, talking about Brooklyn, and you did this beautiful illustration. I have to tell you, it brought back memories for me as a child, these types of buses which had throw-ups on them. And this one is one that you did with two old school writers, Sicko and Kick, and it's the B25 Fulton Street bus.
Yes.
Let's talk about your early childhood in Brooklyn and what that was like.
Well, I drew this specific image from memory because I used to talk to people about this, how I walked down Fulton Street from Nevins all the way to Pearl to the other end, and all the buses had full color pieces on them. And people thought I was crazy. Nobody remembered it. I couldn't find photographic evidence of it anywhere. So I thought it needed to be documented. And I kind of tried to do this one from memory. But yeah, I grew up in downtown Brooklyn. So it was kind of the crossroads of the world. We had Atlantic Avenue right there, where all the different train lines come together. It was sort of a transportation hub, and we could walk across the bridge into Manhattan. Our proximity to a lot of other areas.
So give me an idea of what neighborhood you lived in.
It was called Gowanus. Then they changed it to Borum Hill. When they wanted to try to gentrify it, it needed to sound fancy. But when I was growing up, it was called Gowanus, or downtown Brooklyn. So basically, Nevins Street, after Atlantic, it was considered downtown. So you're talking about Livingston, Schermerhorn, and Fulton. It's just called downtown Brooklyn. Like a lot of cities, wherever they put the courts and the police station and the municipalities is considered downtown. On the other side, below Atlantic, you get into Pacific, Dean, Bergen, Wyckoff. That's just called Gowanus. So, it's a very, very desirable, expensive neighborhood now, but it wasn't that way when I was growing up. Nobody wanted to live there. Most of the brownstones were abandoned with cinder blocks in the window with a big X spray painted on them.
And what was influencing you back then as a kid? Was the hip hop scene kind of coming up at that time?
Hip hop didn't exist as a at least I'd never heard the term. I'm born in '67, so growing up, it was a lot of disco and funk and rock and roll and salsa and boogaloo and all the sounds of New York musically. And we were into, whatever the latest trend was, CB trucker radios, skateboarding, and graffiti. It all went hand in hand. I heard somewhere that the spray can became commercially available in 1967, the year I'm born.
Mm.
That kind of started the whole stylistic revolution, because prior to that, people had to write with a bucket paint, you know?
Right.
So I'm about as old as the movement, and I've always been fascinated by it as long as I can remember. And
But what was the first reference for you though? What really kind of piqued your interest in getting involved in writing?
um, you know, there was a lot of gang writing in my neighborhood, tomahawks, homicides, stompers, and that, it seemed dangerous and rebellious, and that's attractive to a young kid. You know what I mean? Um, but then it began evolving, and I saw these names that weren't necessarily gang affiliated, and they traveled. You'd see the same names in different neighborhoods. And that was amazing to me, because a lot of these gang guys, they couldn't leave their block. You know what I mean? So here were these cats that were able to traverse different neighborhoods. I got on the train, even talking about a baby with my father, had to hold his hand to get on the subway. I'm seeing these names, and it's the same names I'm seeing in the streets. And when we go up to Yankee Stadium for a baseball game, traveling the boroughs, I'm seeing the same names. And that caught my eye. I'm like, this is one dude, and he's everywhere. And already, by the time even before PS38, before grade school, I went to a place called Nevins Daycare Center, and a place called Colony South Brooklyn Houses, which is like preschool, community center. And kids were talking about these writers like they were superheroes, like they were mythological characters.
Do you remember any of the writers' names from that period?
Sure, sure. A lot I couldn't read. Brooklyn styles, even early on, were very ornate, with a lot of curlicues and flourishes and spirals. So as a young kid, I couldn't decipher them all, but some were really plain and stood out to me. And I remember Super Strut, him I could read. Super Strut and Jace, Jace. They were up like crazy at that time. Miko, I could read early on. Who else? Spin. The Brooklyn guys. Like I say, I lived right by Atlantic Avenue, where the bench was. That's like 149th Street,
Yeah.
uptown. So all the names were there. Everybody who was anybody came through my neighborhood. And I couldn't read Jester's tag early on. I thought it said Nestor, because he hooked his day in such a way. So I was mispronouncing a lot of things. And I remember Roto and Scar 36 in my neighborhood doing their thing. I remember Deal and his brother Buster. And Deal was first writing Mike 707 and Mr. Earl. And he was kind of affiliated with the Fabulous Five, who they were doing their thing. I'm talking about now by the bicentennial.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
It had really exploded by the bicentennial. The TOP crew I was aware of, they were everywhere.
And so how did you arrive at your name, KEO?
Long process.
What was that your first name, or was it
No.
it one of many?
My government name, what my mama named me, is Blake, Blake, right? So I wanted to write Blake 1, Blakeo, right? And I had a mentor who wrote Sake 1, and I liked the way he connected it. It kind of, the famous Fuzz 1, Sun 1,
Yes.
with the ONE is script style. I guess Min 1 really popularized it later, but at that time, I saw a lot of Queens guys doing it. So I liked the way it all flowed, the E right into the O, lowercase, almost a script. So I started writing Blake 1, but when I showed it to my mentors, these older cats, Set 3 and Sake from the TPC crew, they were like, you can't write Blake. There's already a Blake.
Right. There was a Blake up in my neighborhood, Blake
Right.
170.
And I'm like, but that's my name. They're like, he don't care. He'll bust your ass. So, I just took out the K and the E and the O from the middle because I liked the way they flowed. And I kept trying different combinations and permutations of letters. And I would show it to my mentors and they'd be like, nope, taken, nope, taken. So when I came with KEO, which doesn't really mean anything, there was already a KED, a KEB, a KEC, you know, KE,
Yeah.
every combination of the letter. So I was like, what about this? And they were like, nah, nobody's writing that. So I just ran with it. It turns out there had been a KEO before me, to be honest, that put up 3YB, and I think he was from Queens, but he didn't really make that big of a mark, and he was already done by the time I was getting into it. So he had a short career.
So it sounds to me that you were really style conscious as a kid. Were you
For
kind
sure.
of,
I chose my name because of the way letters would work together and interlock. So
right? Because normally the name is a perfect name for throw-ups. It
yeah,
comes in that lineage of throw-up names: Leo, Bo, Keo,
yeah.
and
P.O.,
Weo.
Weo.
Yeah,
So we started, you know, on the F line, the double R's, the B's, ding dong lines, you know, and it was all about throw ups. You weren't going to do a wild style. They were Reggies already by that time. You know, the Spirit of '76, those trains came in. They had a red and blue stripe on them, bicentennial trains. And we were about insides and throw ups. So
yeah.
it was quickly executed, bubble letters, and having an O at the end was just perfect, you know, fast and easy.
Talk to me about this kid. You as a young boy, like you're getting into graph. These are two separate images from two separate periods,
Yeah.
and you,
Again, this is later. This is
yeah,
much later. This is like, I think where I have the Adidas hockey jersey and the St. Louis Cardinals hat is going to be '84. And where I'm with the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Guess denim is more like '86 or '87 even, and that picture was taken at the Albee Square Mall. The first picture is in my family home on Nevins and Dean, and that was in the art studio. You can see the paint on the wall behind me and part of an easel. So I'm like, you know, I'm already a working artist.
right, because you're aware of what's going on, and at that time down in the scene, like you shared this picture with me of the Fun Gallery, Patty Astor's Fun Gallery.
So that's my canvas. You see Normski from Rocksteady Crew is bending over looking
Yeah,
at canvas with a green K with a pink 3D, and it's kind of floating in space.
yeah.
This Krylon colors. That was my canvas, my first art show, and it just so happens that I was in there with Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf and Futura 2000 and, you know, Dondi and all the stars of the time. It was a huge group show, but I was tickled pink to be a part of that. So that's me with a Pincheck painter's cap on, over the La Tigra hoodie, my layered look.
So
And
I
I'm
love that
actually
you're
talking to Reese right there. That's Todd
that's
Jane,
Todd.
and that's the little guy next to him wrote Cap FWD. He was from downtown.
I love that you're
Yeah.
talking about fashion and because these pictures, and you had said something very interesting to me earlier about you had taken a hiatus from writing because you just got into some other mode in your life. Everything was about being fresh and clean, and again, given that you were,
I mistakenly thought graffiti was over. Somewhere around '86, some cats that I looked up to were like, "Oh, you're still doing that hippity hoppity beat street shit? You still spinning on your head? That shit is corny. We're getting money." So I thought it was time to, you know, the trains were dying out already by '86. So I thought I needed to evolve, and I got off into some other dumb street shit that probably took me in the wrong direction, and graffiti kind of brought me back, saved my life. So,
right.
you know,
But you were always you
10
were
year
always you were always a hip hop head, and one of the things that we've talked about you in your youth, well, your connection to hip hop, and you were an MC, and you were surrounded by MCs when you were a kid.
Yeah, but I also liked Kiss, and I liked the, you know, I was a kid. I was into whatever my friends were.
Yeah,
So, you know, it wasn't unusual. It's not like, you know, a kid from Iowa decides, oh, I want to join this hip hop thing. I was just doing what my friends were doing.
right.
It came naturally. I wasn't a maverick. I wasn't brave to be doing something different. I was just trying to conform, you know, and do what all my buddies were doing.
And why not stick to MCing? You were good at it. Why didn't you stick to it?
I did. I had fun with it. What do you mean stick to it?
Like,
Make a career of it?
Yeah.
I never thought it was a commercial thing. I didn't think it was you know, when I got into it, it was done for free in the park, and there were no records. Nobody.
There were no probably
you could
white
make
rappers by then, right?
Huh?
Were there any white rappers by then?
Not that I ever saw. No. There was Spanish. You know. I mean, you know, my neighborhood looked like most of New York. It was 80% black and Hispanic, and,
Yeah.
and the rest was a smattering of Asian and
Right.
white. And so I was in a minority throughout public school, but you know,
And in school, you ended up meeting MF Doom and collaborating with him.
no, I didn't meet him in school.
You didn't meet him in school?
No, I met him through friends that I knew from school. Actually goes back to my original graffiti mentor, Sake One. He produced Third Base and Nas's first album and OC's first album and KMD's first album. So it's a connection, but Doom and his brother grew up in Long Island. They were a little further out, and they're younger than I am. So
Right.
it wasn't until I think the 90s that we really connected. And
One of the things that fascinates me about this story as you tell it is that you reconstructed this mask. You did several iterations of this mask from other masks.
yeah, we tried to figure out different disguises for Doom so he could perform in New York. He didn't want to, which I totally understand. He didn't want the celebrity. He loved the act of emceeing.
Right.
He didn't like all the drama that went along with it. So at the time when he transitioned from KMD, he was called Zev Love X. When he became this Doom character, Ghostface had just come out. I guess that's 93. And Ghostface, in his first appearance, he wore a stocking mask over his face, so nobody knew what he looked like. And Doom was inspired by that. He was like, maybe I could do this if I can be anonymous. So that goes back to a graffiti kind of thing, where you get the celebrity and notoriety, but it doesn't affect your personal life because nobody knows what you look like. So
Right.
you can walk down the street and listen to other people talk about, yo, that dude KEO is fresh, and you just laugh.
Right.
It's like being Zorro or mild-mannered Clark Kent.
Right.
Secret
And what people didn't know, I knew. It took me a while to actually realize this myself, that Doom was also a writer.
Yeah. Him and his brother, they were nice with it. I mean, that's his throw up. He does all his own. I laid out his album covers and artwork, but his throw up is his. And
so that was a really interesting period for hip hop, because like a lot of the you know, there were opportunities for writers to do design for album covers, T-shirts, stages.
but there always was.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, you know, even before the MCs came along, when it was just DJs, I'm talking about, you know, mid-70s, they were all graffiti writers. And graffiti writers were doing the flyers for the jams and doing outfits, you know, airbrushing or customizing a jean jacket, painting down the leg of the Lee pants. It always kind of went hand in hand as far as I saw. You know, dudes who were graffiti writers had such emphasis on style and competitive style, originality, and one-upmanship. Oh, he used pink and yellow. I'm going to come with pink, yellow, and green next week, right?
Yeah.
So that translated with a lot of guys into the way they dress, the way they talk, their slang, right? They were inventing new slang. They were staying on, you know, and the music as well. It was just about doing something different, battling, being better than, you know, oh, that crew, they're not as nice as us, you know what I'm saying? So really, I mean, the idea of prior to graffiti, you'd have called it a band, not a crew.
Right.
The word crew comes out of graffiti. You know what I mean? The whole concept of, yo, he bit my style. That's graffiti writer talk. Long before there was rapping.
Right.
Or any. You know what I'm saying? So the first cats I ever heard DJ were already famous as graffiti writers, like App Superhog, rest in peace. Flowers Dice, who was great.
Yeah.
The Flowers. You know, all these cats. And I wasn't up in the Bronx that young, but I've heard Herc tell the same story, that he was well known for writing Cool Herc. That's why when he threw a party, people came, because he was already a celebrity. They're like, oh, Cool Herc is playing music. His name already rang bells. You understand? He was up in the first generation when they put eyeballs in the two O's for cool, you know, and put eyebrows over their O's. That's like 72, right? 71.
There's something quite unique about writers and their branding, you know, especially back in them days, to hear that about Kool Herc branding himself as a writer, getting his name up, and then of course he becomes the infamous DJ that he would become.
Well, you couldn't just have a party and people come. It's not like today where you could be Instagram famous. You had to be known. Who the hell is he? Never heard of him.
Yeah.
You were either known as a graffiti writer, as a cat who could fight real good, a basketball player, something. You had to have a name. Oh, he's the best dancer on the block. People heard of him. Other dancers from other neighborhoods came to battle him. You know what I'm saying? You didn't just put your name on a flyer and people show up. Your name had to ring bells.
Yeah, you had to earn it. Amongst the many things you've done, you wrote for this book, the Beastie Boys book. I want to know more. I've always found it very interesting about their success in hip hop, because they were bigger than hip hop. They were more than hip hop in terms of music, but also of the, you know, the downtown culture. Also big shout out, because they ended up going to Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn as well. In terms of particularly for this book and reflecting on the history of Beastie Boys, did you ever meet them, or did you ever like?
I went to summer camp with Adam Yauk since we were like 9 years old. So my father was a Quaker, right? And Quaker is a religion, but it deals with kind of a radical nonviolence, and they protest a lot, anti-war, anti-death penalty. My father was a hippie type of character, a real activist, you know. So because of his membership in this Quaker meeting, they call their church meeting, I got to go to a Quaker camp. We couldn't normally afford to go to summer camp outside of New York. But because he was an active member, we got it like a scholarship. Now, most of the kids at this camp were from Brooklyn Heights or wealthier neighborhoods, Park Slope. You know, rich Jewish parents were doctors or whatever. So I got to get out of my own neighborhood and go to the woods for 2 weeks every summer, sometimes for 4 weeks. They'd sign us up for 2 sessions to stay out of trouble. And that's where I met Adam Yauk and where I met Saquon. They were like the only cool kids at the camp, so I gravitated towards them. They were already into graffiti and basketball and all these kind of things. So we hung out every summer, you know.
Nice, nice little history factoid there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Another, we're going to highlight a couple of your achievements. Another one was being featured in Bomb the System, the film, the graffiti film. Could you have ever imagined, I mean, yes, Style Wars and Wild Style.
I wish you would have showed the other picture, because what I was really proud of in that film is that I animated the title sequence with my hand style. And
yes. All right. My bad. Yeah.
So that, yeah, they asked me to say a few lines, but I'm not an actor. I'm not really into acting. What I was really paid to do for this film was consult on all things graffiti. I did a lot of the painting, you know, that you see in the background, and I did the animated title sequence. So that was a lot of fun for me. When they asked me to play a character, and I think I had 2 lines, that wasn't, you know, acting is for the birds, bro. It's not my thing. I felt like I said the same thing 1,000 times over and over again until it meant nothing. And they're like, oh, do it again. Do it again.
Right.
This is stupid. And I think they wound up using the first take anyway. You say something until it becomes meaningless. You know what I mean?
Sure. Another project you've lent your talents to was Anna Mansbeck's book, The Rage is Back. And
yeah, I've actually done several of his book covers. The first one was called Angry Black White Boy. And he's become a really good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Great.
What I particularly like about this book in terms of its design is that, you know, you design fonts, you know, for the copy to complement the copy.
My idea, I wanted to do an illuminated manuscript, right? Where the drop caps were gilded and full color, and it just was cost prohibitive. No publisher will do
Right.
You know, interior color. So I really fought to have just the black and white ones, and Adam fought as well with his publisher, and I think it, you know,
I think it's genius. I think I've never seen anybody use graffiti drop caps before.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the illuminated letters, and you know, Ramel Z really got me thinking about the connection between how the monks in the 18th century would try to obscure or camouflage lettering so that only the most learned could gain knowledge.
Yeah.
Not everyone could read it, and how that parallels what we were doing. You know?
What's interesting to that point is these 2 illustrations you did. For instance, on the right-hand side, you have some Hebrew writing, and you also in typeface have arabesque and something you write here, the Egyptian string trick. But again, this is all reference to ancient writings.
Yeah,
and
the other one actually has some Mayan lettering.
Look at that. And here on this one that says the Pro-Keds, you give Top Cat 126 some props in the Broadway elegant style.
Well, that particular Pro-Keds piece was about migration of actual letter forms, and the Broadway style coming from a Philadelphia gangster style, which I related back to some earlier things I had seen in Chicago and Los Angeles, and I believe they might have come from Mexico originally. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they migrated into California gang writing culture, from there to Chicago to Philadelphia, to finally reaching us, even though we had our own style already.
Yeah.
When that Philadelphia tall print, which they call gangster style because it has a flat platform on the bottom. It's a lot of, they're almost, you know, like Mayan shapes,
Yeah.
the architecture. So that changed writing in New York City. And we began to call it, you know, Broadway elegant.
It's the first hand style I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, my older brothers were old school Broadway elegant handwriters.
So people only know about Carlos and Randy, but
Yeah,
I know you
they
got
don't know Ride
bigger brothers.
101 or Dice 215.
Right.
Another thing that I find
So
interesting as we talk.
It was Stan 153 who really taught me
Oh, he had
that
beautiful handwriting.
particular style.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace.
Yes,
Right?
rest in peace, Stan.
Great
He had
brother.
beautiful hands.
Great brother, and so knowledgeable from the very earliest days of
Yeah.
this.
And this particular piece with the S, I like that a couple things going on here in this drawing, because you're paying homage to style, but focused on the S. You know, and of course you're explaining the S as compromise of two spirals, one creative, clockwise, one destructive, waning moon plus waxing symbols for alternating of the evolutive and involutive process. So you're going in deep.
I build and destroy.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I like here, whether these are your original tags or tags that you emulated, the Jester tag, the Strike, the LSD3 tag. Wow, are those original, or is that coming from your memory?
No, I replicated those. I tried to do them from memory and looked at some reference. Strike was another mentor of mine. He was actually at IS 293 with my older brother. So my brother's 4 years older than me, and he tried to write for a minute, but some of his friends in junior high school stuck with it and became a little more successful. So Strike was one of those guys, and I hung around them. You know, my older brother hated it. He'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here, go away, you're annoying us." But I would pick his friends' brains to try to learn about, you know, because there were graffiti writers in my neighborhood that were older. They weren't really fucking with me. I was a little tiny white boy with glasses. So these cats that my brother knew, that was my first entry into like really being able to pick their brains and say, okay, how do you do this? Why do you do this? When do you do it? You know what I mean? Because I was looking at it on the walls. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. You really need a mentor, someone to take you under the wing and show you, okay, this is how we file down the key to get in to the IRT cars. And this is a 600 key, and this is a 400.
Yes. You know, that for those that are listening, and that all might sound like coded language. And that's the one thing about this culture. Things seem so coded when we talk about things like keys, right? And how important keys in terms of
can't get in without a key.
The access, right? With the 400 key that opened every lock in the stations. And
so I say some of these writers today, they have no key.
Yeah.
No clue.
So
no
key. That said, so here you are again. You're a committed hand style writer and style writer and typographer, and you're using that, you know, again, commercially for some really important and cool projects. Notably,
this was another book that I consulted on. I worked with a cat named Johan Kugelberg, really good brother, and he's from Sweden originally. And when he moved to New York, you know, he's like a punk rock skateboarder into street culture in Sweden. But moving to New York, his eyes were open up to some other things, obviously, and he wanted to document it, but do it right. So he sought out certain cats. Joe Conzo for his early photographs. Buddy Esquire, may he rest in peace, contributed a lot of flyers, and he interviewed the real cats. I believe they wanted to work with Phase 2 as well, but rest in peace, Phase 2 was notoriously difficult. You know, he's a very secretive cat. He wouldn't just talk to anyone.
Right.
So they wound up with Buddy Esquire, who gave them full access to his archives.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of good people in this book, a lot of heavy hitters that wrote for it. Um, and I'm happy to say that I contributed as well, because it's such a seminal book about my neighborhood and people in my neighborhood, and that time when I was coming up.
And the beautiful thing about Johan, I want to say this, he's actually a good dude. He's not a culture vulture.
No.
He paid guys more than what they asked for. You know, some guys were down on their luck. They were like, yo, I got these flyers, give me $100. He was like, how about I give you 1,000, right? And when he was done documenting it all, high-res scans, publish a book, he donated it all to
Cornell.
A university where it's now the public.
It's part of the Cornell Hip Hop Archive.
Yeah, and I know that he worked for a long time to find the right institution to donate it all to.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's not trying to buy low and sell high. He's buying high and then donating to the public realm, where some of this stuff might be lost forever.
In the public interest, and he, you know, he had helped them curate the show at the university, and of course, you know, the archive is incredible. It's Bambaata's archive, the Buddy Esquire. It's got Scene UA, it's got me, it's got Crazy Legs, and many others. And again, I give him props, because he was not thinking about hoarding this stuff. It's about making it useful for future generations.
This dude respected the culture so much. His son, who was born in New York City, he knew he couldn't teach him everything as being Swedish born, right? So he hired, I think Jazzy J was giving him DJ lessons. He was hiring me to teach him graffiti as a little kid. Like how other kids go to, you know, soccer class and piano class once a week. This kid is learning to scratch with Jazzy J. He's learning graffiti from me. And I remember the kid was like maybe 8, 9 years old. And I'm like, so, who's your favorite graffiti writer? And he said, Kid 56.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
56.
Yeah, your partner. TKA.
Yeah, that was my partner. Yeah.
Man.
Holy shit. That's so.
So I was like, okay, Johan, I can work with this kid.
You know, it's funny. So you're teaching him the ABCs of Styles. You participate in the ABCs of Style book, and you're lending your talents to advance the culture. You know, to you and many other artists who supported Chino and Dana on this book. That's become very successful.
Big up Dana and Chino BYI, of course. It's my brother. You know, they've done a lot to preserve and document the culture, which, you know, even though there were books and documentaries and films coming from the early 80s, they were generally from an outside eye. And these folk, you know, Chino in particular, came out of the culture, and he was the first one to document it for international magazine, The Source, to bring it to that level.
Yeah, and that launched a lot of careers. His work.
He's written several books since, and I've been blessed to participate in a couple of them. Donate some artwork or whatever it is, because, you know, Chino always reaches out to me when he's got a project, and I appreciate that, brother.
One of the great ambassadors of the culture. You recently also did this acid piece. And this was a group collaboration. It's a part of a bigger project, part of the Drew Estate cigar project. And yeah, you guys did these really cool water towers. This was Art Basel, right? 2019.
We actually did the water towers prior to that, and then we had a group show sponsored by Drew Estates Acid Cigars at Art Basel. Yeah. So Drew is a huge collector and supporter of graffiti art.
Yeah.
He's got an amazing collection, and he knows style. You know what I mean? He's not like buying whatever's hot this week. Oh, Banksy, it's not an investment.
No,
He
he's JD. He's
sees what he
he's
likes.
definitely interested. He listens. He's been a big supporter of us here at the museum and loaning us works. So big up to Drew. Also here in Miami, you did this piece here, the Soul Train piece. Tell us a bit about this.
You know, that's my brother Gingy Brown.
Yeah.
He moved from the Bronx down to Little Haiti section of Miami and opened a boxing gym. He's a great fighter. He's a great dude, graffiti writer, a musician. He's one of those Renaissance dudes, like those Green and them kind of cats we come from. They can do anything. He's a natural. Capoeira,
Yeah.
martial arts, you know what I mean?
And he's a good DJ.
Yeah, he produced a whole lot of hip hop and house. I don't want to mislabel it. I think it's called Yoruba house is the particular genre where he really made a mark. But he was, you know, engineer on a lot of 90s huge hip hop records with Premier and Pete Rock and cats like that at Green Street Studios. A lot of the classic records to come out.
I feel that people sleep on drums. They don't really know his full story.
Nobody knows anybody else's full story.
Yeah, but I mean, he's a dude that's done quite a bit. I want to move on to you and your crews, right? Because you're down with some heavy hitters. Of course, X-Men crew,
Yes.
Tattoo and those guys from Brooklyn, Zier and all those guys. Tell me about X-Men crew and when you weren't part of the original crew, right? You came in a little bit later.
In '79. Here's how it started. Nevin Street, where I grew up, that's where Tattoo lives, and most of the original members were from Wyckoff Projects, downtown Brooklyn, and Tattoo went to Brooklyn Tech. So Brooklyn Tech is a magnet school for cats from all boroughs. So that's where he met So, you know, Link 2, Big 279, from Queens, from Jackson Heights. And they began to link up and they formed this super crew. Because So was already, you know, writing with TCP on the 6 line, Mason, those guys. He was writing with Flame and Fuzz and Sun in Queens on the 7 line.
You're naming some names.
So once they joined forces at high school, and these magnet schools, like I went to music and art, you went to art and design, that's where cats from different boroughs got together and formed these bonds and exchanged ideas. So X-Men started at Brooklyn Tech High School. And you know, I had beef with them at first because they were from my neighborhood, and that's just how things went. You know, we were ice grilling each other like, yo, what are you doing on our block? And generally, that's how you got down with a crew in those days. You fought them and earned their respect.
Yeah.
And say, yo, we're going painting tomorrow, man. You're cool. You can come with us. You got a little heart. So I was at Music and Art. By 1981 or 2, I met West and Risk and Surge FC, and they had another kid, Pleaser, who wrote Oh Boy. So I brought those guys from Uptown, they were one-line writers, into the X-Men crew. I actually brought West to Wyckoff Projects.
Wow.
1982, and was like, yo, this is my little man. I vouch for him. He's got style. He's got a little heart. He's going to do big things.
I'm glad you mentioned this, because then that brings back that tie to FC, because I was wondering how FC tied into you and the X-Men.
FC is actually a Yonkers crew. Before West, you know, they kind of came up under TVS.
With Shock. My dudes, right? Shock and
well, TVS had a Yonkers division,
right,
and they had a Staten Island division.
Yeah.
But the you know, the cats that were doing it at that time on the one line were like Zeke and Swan, and
Yeah.
So, the original FC members, Phil 167, who wrote Thud, Raz, Alas, they put West down, and eventually West became the president. He took it to a whole nother level, and he put me down, and I put him in my crew, X-Men, and then, we were little kids at that time. And then FC wasn't really making noise at that time. West and Risk and Surge, they took it and made it something.
And how did the Cool Five factor into this as part of your?
That's a convoluted story, because I was down with a cat named Cess 157 in music and art my freshman year. I'm talking about 1980. And CES 157, he was partners with Scene, Rupert, Black Scene as they call him.
Yeah, Scene TC5.
Right, TC5, exactly. So everybody called him Lil Scene or Black Scene. And he was also writing with Scheme at the time. And there was some kind of, originally we were all down with a crew called TNT before TC5. TC5 was the Crazy Five, was Blade and Comet, right? Vam and Tull. So before the Cool Five, cats were part of TNT. And that was Q and Fade and
LC,
Mon,
yeah,
EN005.
Yeah. I used to write with those guys, yeah. Mackie,
who went to my high school as well. So Fade lived in Wyckoff Projects for a while, PHADE. And Sparta, who might be on here tonight, Sparta went on to be part of a group called Nucleus. They made Jam on it. A wiggy, but they were like Flatbush Crown Heights cats, right? And then he made a house record called There's Some Hoes in This House. There's Some Hoes, which is now the biggest record in America, because I guess WAP, Wet Ass Pussy or whatever, samples his voice. So that was a writer called Sparta TNT. And those guys put me and my man Lon down. And it's a convoluted story, bro. I went back to music and art, and me and Cess 157 were taking tags. I remember clear as day, he had a white Pentel. You remember the little stubby pump up, the first white opaques, right? And I was writing Dose at the time, D-O-S-E. I used to write Doser. And I wrote Dose, TNT. And he said, why you put that up? And I said, because I'm down. So who put you down? I said, well, Sparta, Brooklyn recruiter, right? So I guess what I didn't know behind the scenes is that Fade, who was already retiring and getting into airbrushing, he became the Shirt Kings and did really change fashion in New York. He was kind of phasing out with the subway trains. He gave the crew to Rupert to Scene TC5 one day, and he smoked dust and forgot about it, and then he gave it to Scheme the next day. So where the two of them had been partners, now all of a sudden they had this disagreement about who was the new president of TNT. So, long story short, Scene and Doze decided at the same time Comet had passed TC5 on to Scene, because they were from the same neighborhood. And they decided, you know what, we're just going to run with this and make it the Cool Five. Let them rock with TNT. So it became a little competition. I didn't know any of this backstory. I learned it years later, but I got caught in the mix where Scheme was like, yo, it's my crew now, and you're barred, and I'm kicking out all the toys. And I was like, toys or whatever. It became a big beef. I don't want to dwell on negativity and beef, because it's all love now.
Yeah.
But that's how it was back then. If you put up 3 letters of a crew, you had to be official. You had to be certified, man. Somebody had to vouch for you.
Right. And what's really cool is I thought in this little section is like you have 3 really major crews. You know, you have the X-Men, and of course FC and TC5, and it's just like
it was calculated because the X-Men was pretty much all city by that time,
yeah,
but we didn't have a presence on Broadway. So when I saw these younger cats who were already FC and would later become TC5, you know, Psycho brought West to Doze and Scene and said, yo, put them down, just like I brought West to Tattoo and these cats and said, yo, put them down. I vouched for them.
yeah,
Because I knew they were going to do big things on the Broadway line, and that was one aspect that we were missing in our quest for all city. We weren't really up. So now you got photographs, Zier, Zane, Risk, Westo, X-Men, Burners on the Broadway line.
yeah. That was the next generation after me and my guys were rocking those lines, those one lines. And what's interesting, one of the things we had talked about.
Well, you're an old man, Carlos.
No, but one of the things that's interesting is as we were talking, and I'm reflecting on the development of your style and those things that were influencing you. Interesting on this KEO piece, I had thought at first about TMT, but then I went to Scene for this particular type of style. But you were so right, and going back and saying, look, they're descendants of the TMT, that magnificent team, which
I think that Chain
and Cade, right,
revolutionized that particular style. And what I was trying to learn was, you know, anybody can do a wild style with 1,000,000 arrows and 30 colors and stars and clouds and have it look spectacular to someone who doesn't know any better. But to do a simple style and have it look proper, that's difficult. Simple is hard, man. And this particular piece is in an alleyway off of Albemarle Road, and what you can't see there, right through the E, there's a turn. It turns a corner. So there's actually a ledge there that's like a foot deep. So I had to take the photograph from a straight on angle or that would break apart. I had to paint around the corner. So that's Albemarle Road and East 21st. And there are, if you know those apartment buildings in Flatbush, there's a way to go a few steps down into the backyard where they bring the trash out. And only the super has access. Those walls live forever. So you can go down some of those and see old deadly spear tags and tags going back to the 70s. Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as we're looking at some more of your work, this one on an abandoned train, and you're bringing back Mr. Doom, putting him back into the mix. But I really want to get to this, some of your influences on style. Because you in this particular piece that you painted with Reese, there's also something I need to kind of point out at this point is how characters are important in your piecing, how you integrate them. But more importantly, in this picture, and I want to draw the focus on the KEO piece as much as I can, because here one of the things that stood out to me was. Again, we talked about this, the cleanliness of the line, the balance of letters, and where that influence came from. And of course, we could talk about the old timers, Chain and Part, and those guys that really laid down the blueprint. But Dondi, and specifically, was an influence on you and your lettering style.
Yeah, Dondi, to me, is the Rakim of graffiti writing, because he didn't invent these styles, but he did them better than anyone before him. He made it sharper and crisper, and nobody really has burned Rakim since, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
That's the epitome. So these styles were based on what TDS and TMT had done before Dondi, and they were basing it on what INDs and these cats had done before them, Riff and lapel, a bot, right? So when I saw Dondi pieces, they just looked super clean, just perfect, man. And he didn't need, this is a particularly wild outline that you put up.
Yeah.
This too has a lot of isms, but he didn't need, you know, he could put one arrow and burn the whole line.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
bicentennial refers to 1976. I'm sorry, I'm answering a question for Worldwide.
Yeah.
Zeb. It was the 200th anniversary of America, the corporation, and everything was red, white, and blue. So a lot of dudes did pieces that year with, there were whole trains with red, white, and blue. It was the spirit of 76. So it was 1976, was 200 years after the founding of this nation, which probably ain't gonna last too much longer. So enjoy it while you got it.
So I want to come back to this conversation about Dondi here. This piece, this Too Hard piece you did, you know, as I'm referencing Dondi in terms of some of the images that I pull up, like the Too Many, but you, right. Again, you came back and said to me, well,
no, I was looking at too much.
TMT, at Too Much, right?
I was biting too much.
And you know who else wrote Too Much was Case 2 as well.
Yeah. But I was particularly looking at those Teen and Cade cars that were so amazing, because they were kind of naive, like how this Dondi shit is perfect. If you look, you know, that piece that you're showing right now, Too Many, the original outline is in Subway Art, next to the photo, and he nailed it as though he had used an overhead projector. It was perfect.
Yeah.
And the cats before them, TMT, their shit was a little funkier, and I was trying to capture that because I felt like after Dondi's styles got really stiff, super mechanical, and almost anal retentive. And I wanted to bring a little bit more of the loose funk into it, you know? So you kind of round the edges and you make it a little fuzzy, you know? That's what Knock was so incredible with. Knock could show up with 3 cans and not even good colors, like a hunter green, a fucking battleship gray, and burn everyone. Yeah. And you didn't know where the letter began and ended. It was like you had to rub your eyes when that shit rolled in because you thought you were hallucinating. There were no hard edge lines, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true. And if we think about what I remember of those days, particularly when Dondi did the Too Many, one of the things that CIA was doing was we were following TDS and TMT and TFP. And so when those guys did a name like Too Bad or Too Nasty, we would come up with names with twos or with W's.
I think Too Bad was Peso, right? Or no, Cool 131.
Cool 131, yeah.
But he got it from Riff.
Yeah.
So they were taking names that, you know, all these cats had multiple aliases. And you couldn't take a dude's name, his main name, but you could flip his aliases.
And there was a reason for that. And you know,
it was a battle. It was a battle.
Yeah. So you learn names to battle, also to, you know, remain somewhat anonymous. So folks,
I liken it to dance hall, where one dude would come out with a rhythm, right? And every DJ, every singer would do his version of that same rhythm.
Exactly.
It was a competition.
Yeah. That's a good analogy right there. So folks, hang tight with us because we're gonna do a part 2 because Instagram gives us an hour. So I'm just gonna save the video. Stay on. I'll be right back, and we'll continue this conversation with Blake and be right back.
Don't touch that dial.
Don't touch that dial. I'll be right back.